stone floor was cold beneath Thaddeus Corbin's knees. He'd knelt before King Alaric Mackenzie exactly twice in 8 years. Once when he swore his oath as royal investigator. Once when he brought evidence that saved the king's life from a poisoning plot. This was the third time, and it wasn't by choice. The great hall stretched before him like a cathedral of judgment. Torchlight flickered against walls hung with tapestries, showing 3 generations of Mackenzie rule. The smell of burning wax mixed with damp stone and fear. Thaddeus's fear, though he kept his breathing steady, hands relaxed at his sides. 200 people filled the hall, lords in velvet and silk, ladies with faces carefully blank, guards lining the walls, hands on sword hilts, servants pressed into corners, eyes wide, all watching him. The captain of the guard stood behind Thaddeus, one hand heavy on his shoulder, not restraining, not yet. Just a reminder that restraint was one word away. King Alaric sat on the throne of black granite that had judged men for 2 centuries. He was 55 gray, threading through dark hair, face carved by years of rule, into something harder than the stone beneath him. His eyes, once warm when they looked at Thaddeus, were ice now. "Stand him up!" The captain hauled Thaddeus to his feet, not gently. Lord Chancellor Edmund Ashford stood 3 paces from the throne. Tall, silver-haired, elegant, in black robes trimmed with gold. Thaddeus's mentor for 6 years. The man who'd recommended him for royal investigator. The man who'd taught him that justice mattered more than politics. The man who was about to destroy him. Ashford held a leather bag in one hand. With the other, he gestured to a clerk who stepped forward, carrying a ledger bound in red leather. "Your Majesty?" Ashford's voice carried through the hall without effort. 3 days ago, acting on information received, I ordered a search of the royal investigator's quarters. Thaddeus kept his face neutral. Years of interrogating liars had taught him to mask emotion. But his mind raced. 3 days ago, he'd been in the forest tracking down a witness. His rooms had been empty. Convenient. Ashford upended the bag. Gold crowns spilled across the stone floor. They rang like bells, like death knells, 500 crowns at least. More wealth than a royal investigator earned in 5 years. The hall erupted in whispers. Ashford raised his hand. Silence fell. 500 gold crowns, he said, hidden beneath the floorboards of Investigator Corbin's chamber. And this, he opened the ledger, a record of payments received from merchant Lord Vincent Caro in exchange for overlooking certain irregularities in customs inspections. Thaddeus's throat tightened. Vincent Caro. He'd been investigating Maestro for smuggling, had evidence of weapons moving through the port without tax, had been preparing to present findings to the king within the week. Now this. These are lies, Thaddeus said. His voice came out steady. Good. Your Majesty, I've never taken payment from Caro or anyone else. That gold was planted. The ledger is a forgery. Silence. The king's word cracked like a whip. Thaddeus closed his mouth, jaw tight. Ashford walked closer. His expression was sorrow. Perfect practice sorrow that would convince everyone in this hall except the one man who knew the truth. Thaddeus, he said quietly, using his first name, like they were still mentor and student, like this was a teaching moment. I wanted to believe in you. God knows I wanted to be wrong, but the evidence is false, Thaddeus interrupted. Chancellor, you know my work. Nearly a decade without a single complaint, 47 cases solved, 3 assassination plots uncovered. You've been corrupted. Ashford's voice hardened. Perhaps gradually. Perhaps you justified it to yourself. A small payment here, a blind eye there, until one day you woke up and realized you'd become the very thing you swore to fight. The accusation struck deep, not because it was true, because it was precisely calibrated to wound. King Alaric stood. The movement silenced the room more effectively than any command. He descended from the throne, walked toward Thaddeus. Each footstep echoed. Thaddeus had seen that walk before. Seen it when the king sentenced a lord to exile for treason. Seen it when he ordered a corrupt tax collector hanged. It was the walk of a man who'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed. The king stopped 3 feet away, looked Thaddeus in the eyes. For a moment, Thaddeus thought he saw doubt. A flicker of the man who'd clasped his shoulder after the poisoning case, who'd said, "You're the kind of man this kingdom needs." Then it was gone. I trusted you, King Alaric said quietly. I gave you authority, power, access to my inner councils, and you used it to line your pockets. Your Majesty, please, silence. The king's hand moved to his belt, drew the ceremonial dagger he carried, held it out. Thaddeus stared at the blade. It was tradition. When a royal investigator swore his oath, he placed his hand on that dagger and pledged his life to truth and justice. The king reversed the blade, offered the handle. Your oath, he said. Thaddeus's hand moved automatically, reached for the dagger. His fingers closed around the leather-wrapped grip familiar as his own breath. The king's hand shot out, gripped Thaddeus's wrist like iron. Is broken. He twisted. The motion was sharp practiced. The dagger clattered to the floor between them. The symbolism was clear to everyone watching. The oath broken, the bond severed. King Alaric stepped back. His voice carried to every corner of the hall. Thaddeus Corbin, you are hereby stripped of your position as royal investigator. You are stripped of all authority or rights or protections afforded by that office. He paused. You will be confined to the Tower Dungeon until such time as a full inquiry can be conducted into the extent of your corruption. The Tower Dungeon, not the holding cells where drunks slept off ale. The Tower, where traitors waited for execution. Thaddeus opened his mouth, closed it. What could he say that wouldn't sound like the desperate lies of a guilty man? Two guards moved forward, gripped his arms. He didn't resist, didn't struggle, met the king's eyes one last time. I didn't do this, he said quietly, but I will prove who did. The king's expression didn't change. Take him. They dragged him from the hall, through corridors he'd walked freely for years, past servants who pressed against walls, faces turning away. No one would meet his eyes. No one wanted to be associated with a disgraced investigator. The tower stairs spiraled upward, narrow, dark. The guards hauled him up, not bothering to slow when he stumbled. His shoulder struck stone. Pain lanced through his arm. He bit back a sound. The cell was exactly as he remembered. 12 feet square, one narrow window with iron bars, straw on the floor already musty with damp, a bucket in the corner for waste. The smell hit him like a wall. Previous occupants had left their marks in smell and scratches on the wall, counting days and rust-colored stains he didn't want to examine too closely. The guards shoved him inside. One paused at the door. Thought you were different, Corbin, he said. His voice held genuine disappointment. Thought you were one of the good ones. The door slammed. The lock turned with a finality that echoed in Thaddeus's chest. He was alone. He stood motionless in the cell's center, breathing, thinking. Nearly a decade of service. Waking before dawn to review cases, tracking criminals through mud and blood, writing reports by candlelight, testifying in trials, putting his life at risk for justice. Gone. One planted bag of gold, one forged ledger, one perfectly executed frame. His legs gave out. He sat heavily against the wall, stone cold through his clothes. Think. That's what he did. That's what he was good at. Not panicking, not raging. Thinking. The evidence was too perfect, too convenient. 500 gold crowns was specific. Not 400, not 600. 500, exactly the amount that would seem like substantial payment, but not so much as to be unbelievable. The ledger with his signature. Forged, obviously, but by someone skilled. Someone who'd studied his handwriting. The timing. 3 days ago when he was away from the castle, when his rooms would be empty. And the accusation itself. Corruption involving Vincent Caro, the very man Thaddeus had been investigating. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. The question was by whom Ashford's face filled his mind. That expression of perfect sorrow. The way he'd held the ledger like it pained him to present it. But why Ashford was Lord Chancellor, second only to the king in power? What possible reason would he have to destroy a royal investigator? Unless Thaddeus's breath caught. Unless Thaddeus had gotten too close to something. Unless his investigation into missing tax revenue had touched something bigger than smuggling. 3 months ago, that's when it started. He closed his eyes, let his mind replay the memory. The treasury reports hadn't balanced. A small discrepancy, 200 gold crowns unaccounted for. Probably just an accounting error. The chief treasurer had waved it off. But Thaddeus had been trained to notice patterns. Trained by Ashford himself, ironically. Small cracks reveal foundation problems, the chancellor had said. Never ignore the details. So Thaddeus hadn't ignored it. He'd gone back through the records. Found more discrepancies. Hundreds of gold crowns. Always small amounts. Always explained away as errors or legitimate expenses that were poorly documented. But together they added up to 12,000 gold crowns. 12,000 crowns that had simply vanished from the kingdom's treasury over 2 years. Someone was stealing, systematically, carefully, and covering their tracks with bureaucratic fog. Thaddeus had compiled his findings. had brought them to Ashford 6 weeks ago, laid them out in the Chancellor's private study, explained the pattern. Ashford had listened, had nodded thoughtfully, had said, "Gather more proof before we accuse anyone. We need this airtight." Thaddeus had agreed, had continued investigating, and now he was in a cell, his hands clenched. Stone bit into his palms. Ashford, it had to be. The Lord Chancellor controlled the Treasury, had access to all records, could manipulate accounts and blame subordinates, could make small thefts add up to a fortune over time. And when Thaddeus started noticing, started asking questions, the Chancellor had set him up, planted evidence, destroyed him before he could destroy the conspiracy. Perfect, brutal, effective. Thaddeus's laugh was harsh in the empty cell. Not humor, recognition. He'd been played by a master, by the man who'd taught him to investigate in the first place. Footsteps on the stairs, light, quick, not guards. Thaddeus stood, moved to the door, peered through the small grate. A figure emerged from the shadows, small, wearing a cloak too large for her frame. She pulled back the hood. Beatrice Harlow, 26 years old, dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been Thaddeus's assistant for 2 years. Junior investigator, smart, dedicated, asked questions that made him think. She glanced at the guard post. Empty. The guards rotated shifts at sunset. She had maybe 3 minutes. "Master Corbin," she whispered through the grate. "Beatrice." Relief washed through him. At least one person hadn't written him off. "You shouldn't be here. If they catch you, they won't." She pressed something through the bars, a small cloth bundle. "Bread, cheese, they're not feeding you yet." His stomach clenched at the mention of food. He hadn't eaten since dawn, hadn't even noticed hunger until now. "Thank you." He took the bundle. "But you need to leave. Association with me will destroy your career." "My career can burn." Her voice was fierce. "I know you didn't do this." "How?" "Because I've worked beside you for 2 years. I've seen you turn down gifts from nobles grateful for solved cases. I've watched you spend your own coin to help witnesses who couldn't afford food. You're the most relentless, principled man I've ever met." She paused. "Also, I checked the ledger." Thaddeus's pulse quickened. "And the handwriting is good, very good, but there's a tell. You always loop your Y descenders twice. Habit from your father teaching you to write, you told me once. The ledger loops them once." Pride swelled in his chest. She'd learned well. "It's forged," he said. "I know, but proving that to the king." She shook her head. "Ashford presented it with such conviction, and the gold in your room was planted." Beatrice listened carefully. He gripped the bars. "This isn't just about me. I was investigating embezzlement from the Treasury. 12,000 gold crowns over 2 years. I reported it to Ashford." Her eyes widened. "The Chancellor?" "I didn't suspect him then, but now," Thaddeus kept his voice low, "he's the only one who could manipulate records that extensively, the only one who could make this disappear. If Ashford is stealing from the king—" She stopped, swallowed. "Master Corbin, that's treason." "I know. And if you accuse him without ironclad proof, you'll be executed as a liar trying to deflect blame." "I know that too." Footsteps echoed from below, the guard returning from his rounds. Beatrice's head snapped toward the sound. "I have to go." "Beatrice," Thaddeus caught her eyes through the grate. "I need you to do something for me, something dangerous." "Name it." "Ashford will have destroyed evidence in his office. But he's arrogant. He'll have kept the real records somewhere. Probably thinks no one would dare search his private chambers. I'll find them." Her jaw set, determined. "I'll get you proof. If you're caught, then I'm caught." She pulled her hood back up. "You taught me that justice matters more than safety, Master Corbin. I'm a poor student if I don't apply the lesson." She vanished down the stairs like smoke. Thaddeus stood at the door long after she'd gone, listening to silence. She was risking everything, her position, her safety, possibly her life. For him, for justice. He unwrapped the cloth bundle. Bread still warm, cheese good quality, and something else. A small piece of parchment folded tight. He unfolded it. Her handwriting quick and neat. "You've investigated 47 cases from cells worse than this. You know every guard, every weakness, every escape route. They locked you in the tower. They should have killed you. Their mistake." Despite everything, Thaddeus smiled. She was right. He'd spent his entire career investigating crimes. Many of those investigations had started in this very tower, interviewing prisoners, studying the structure, learning how criminals thought and moved. He knew this place better than the guards did. The window faced east. He'd watched Dawn from that window during a 3-day interrogation of a murderer 2 years ago. Knew the bars were old iron rusted in spots. Knew the mortar holding them had been poorly maintained. The door was solid oak. But the lock was standard. Same mechanism as a dozen others in the castle. He'd picked locks in 5 separate investigations. Had tools hidden in his boot heel for exactly that purpose. The guards rotated every 6 hours. Current guard was Malcolm. Former soldier Methodical did rounds every 40 minutes like clockwork. But Malcolm also had a bad knee from a training accident. Couldn't move fast on stairs. The escape route from this cell to the forest was 15 minutes if you knew the passages. Thaddeus knew them, had used them to move witnesses in secret during sensitive investigations. They'd locked him in the tower thinking it would hold him. They'd forgotten who he was, what he was. He'd spent years learning to think like criminals, learning their methods, their escape routes, their hiding places. Now he'd use every lesson, but not yet. Escaping now would make him look guilty. Would confirm every accusation. Would let Ashford win by default. No, he'd wait. Let them think he was broken. Let them relax their guard. And while he waited, Beatrice would gather evidence. When he moved, it would be with purpose, with proof, with a plan to take down not just Oswin Blackwood. He'd almost forgotten about the steward, but the man had to be involved, but Ashford himself. Thaddeus moved to the window, looked out at the kingdom spread below, lights flickering in the city. The river reflecting moonlight like a silver ribbon. Years of loyal service. One planted bag of gold. Career destroyed, but not finished. Never finished. They took my badge, he said quietly to the night. My authority, my freedom. He pressed his forehead against the coal bars. What they forgot is that I don't need a badge to find the truth. I just need time, and patience, and the skills they can't take away. The moon climbed higher. Thaddeus ate the bread slowly. Drank water from a tin cup left in the cell. Thought through every detail of the past 3 months. Ashford had made one mistake. He'd taught Thaddeus too well, and now that training was going to destroy him. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Storm coming. Thaddeus could smell rain on the wind. Good. Storms meant chaos, meant distraction, meant opportunity. He settled onto the straw. Not comfortable, but he'd slept in worse during field investigations. Closed his eyes, but didn't sleep. Just waited. Planning. Years of training, teaching him to catch traitors. Time to catch the biggest one of all, 3 months earlier. Thaddeus Corbin sat in his small office on the 2nd floor of the castle's east wing. Dawn light filtered through a single narrow window. He'd been awake since before sunrise, which meant he'd been awake for 2 hours. The Treasury reports lay spread across his desk like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Numbers didn't lie, people lied. Witnesses lied, suspects lied, even victims sometimes lied. But numbers just existed. They added up or they didn't. These didn't. Chief Treasurer Wilhelm Grath had brought the quarterly report 3 days ago. Tall man, nervous energy, always sweating even in winter. He'd placed the leather-bound ledger on Thaddeus's desk with hands that trembled slightly. Routine audit, Grath had said. Everything balances, more or less. More or less. Those 2 words had lodged in Thaddeus's mind like a splinter. He'd spent 40 hours since then going through the numbers. Tax revenue from the northern provinces. Customs duties from the port. Fines from the magistrate courts. Rents from crown lands. Every gold crown that flowed into the kingdom's coffers should have been accounted for. Should have been. 200 gold crowns were missing. Not a fortune, not even unusual. Accounting errors happened. A merchant paid in silver instead of gold, and the conversion rate got recorded wrong. A tax collector rounded down instead of up. A clerk transposed numbers while copying ledgers by candlelight. Except, Thaddeus pulled out the previous quarter's report, the one before that, going back 3 years. He'd requisitioned them from the Treasury archives yesterday. The clerks had looked at him oddly, but hadn't questioned it. Royal investigators could request any document they wanted. He spread them across the desk. 12 quarters, 3 years of revenue, and there it was, the pattern. Every single quarter showed discrepancies. Small amounts, never more than 300 crowns, never less than 150. Always explained away in the notes as accounting adjustments or reconciliation of prior period errors. 12 quarters, 2,400 gold crowns. No, wait. Thaddeus grabbed fresh parchment, started calculating. If the pattern went back further than 3 years, he worked for another hour. Requested records going back 5 years. The archive clerk had been less cooperative this time. That's a lot of old ledgers, investigator. May I ask what case requires routine audit? Thaddeus had said, using Grath's own words. The clerk had brought them, reluctantly. 5 years of records, 20 quarters. The pattern held. Every quarter. Small discrepancies. Always explained. Always buried in bureaucratic language that made eyes glaze over. 4,800 gold crowns. Thaddeus sat back. His chair creaked in the silence. Someone was stealing from the king. Had been for at least 5 years. Probably longer. Small amounts. Systematic. Professional. This wasn't a tax collector skimming. This wasn't a merchant bribing his way out of duties. This was institutional. This required access to the treasury itself. Required the ability to manipulate records. Required authority that wouldn't be questioned. The list of people with that kind of access was short. Chief Treasurer Grath. Possible, but the man was too nervous, too obvious. Thieves who stole thousands of crowns didn't sweat through meetings. Master of coin, Lord Pelham. 60 years old, wealthy from inheritance, no obvious need for money, but greed didn't always follow logic. The royal steward, Oswin Blackwood, managed all castle expenditures, had his fingers in every financial transaction. Ambitious, smooth, the kind of man who smiled while calculating how to use you, and overseeing all of them, Lord Chancellor Edmund Ashford, Thaddeus's mentor, the man who'd recommended him for royal investigator, who'd taught him that details mattered, that patterns revealed truth, that justice required patience and precision. No, not Ashford. The chancellor was wealthy, yes, but from legitimate sources. His family had held lands for generations. He had no need to steal. Still, Thaddeus had learned to follow evidence, not assumptions, learned it from Ashford himself. He gathered the ledgers, stacked them carefully, wrapped them in oilcloth to protect from rain. The chancellor's office was in the North Tower. Private, secure. The walls were lined with books on law, history, governance. A fire burned in the hearth, even in summer. Ashford claimed old bones felt cold. Thaddeus climbed the stairs, knocked on the heavy oak door. Enter. The office smelled of parchment and pipe smoke. Ashford sat behind a desk that had served 5 chancellors before him. He was reading a document, quill in hand, making notes in the margin. He looked up when Thaddeus entered. Investigator Corbin? Ashford's smile was warm, genuine as far as Thaddeus could tell, and he was good at telling. This is early even for you. Trouble sleeping. Working, my lord. Thaddeus set the wrapped ledgers on the desk. I need your counsel on a matter. Ashford set down his quill, gestured to a chair. Sit. Tell me. Thaddeus unwrapped the ledgers, explained the discrepancies, showed the pattern across 5 years, laid out the numbers with the precision Ashford had taught him. The chancellor listened without interrupting. His expression remained neutral, professional. When Thaddeus finished, Ashford leaned back in his chair. 4,800 crowns, he said quietly. At minimum, the pattern likely extends further back. And you believe this is theft, not accounting error. The consistency suggests intent, my lord. Errors are random. This is methodical. Ashford stood, walked to the window, looked out over the castle grounds. The morning sun cast his shadow long across the floor. You've done excellent work, Thaddeus, as always. He turned. But this is delicate. Accusing someone in the treasury of systematic theft, if you're wrong, it destroys careers. If you're right, it reveals weakness in the crown's own financial controls. I understand, my lord. Do you? Ashford's tone sharpened slightly. The king is already dealing with unrest in the southern provinces. Tax revenue is down because of poor harvests. The last thing His Majesty needs is to hear that his own treasury has been compromised. Thaddeus met his eyes. The last thing His Majesty needs is to continue losing money to a thief. A long pause, then Ashford smiled. You're right, of course. Justice over politics. I taught you that. He returned to his desk. Here's what we'll do. Continue your investigation. Quietly. Gather more proof. We need this airtight before we bring it to the king. No room for doubt. Who should I focus on? Start with the lower-level clerks. Work your way up. Someone is manipulating the numbers. Find out who has the access and the skill. Ashford's hand rested on the ledgers. Leave these with me. I'll review them myself. Make sure we're not missing anything. Thaddeus hesitated. Those ledgers were evidence. He'd compiled them himself. Didn't want them out of his control. But Ashford was Lord Chancellor, second only to the king. If Thaddeus couldn't trust him, who could he trust? Of course, my lord. Good man. Ashford walked him to the door, placed a hand on his shoulder. Thaddeus, be careful. Whoever is doing this has been successful for years. They're smart, dangerous. Don't confront anyone until you have proof solid enough to withstand any defense. I won't. And Thaddeus, Ashford's grip tightened slightly. Tell no one else about this. Not the other investigators, not the guards. Walls have ears. If word gets out that we suspect Treasury corruption, the thief will destroy evidence and disappear. Understood. Thaddeus left the office. Descended the stairs. His boots echoed on stone. Something felt wrong. Not obviously wrong, not dramatically wrong. Just a whisper of instinct that years of investigation had sharpened into a tool as reliable as reason. Ashford's reaction had been perfect. Appropriate concern. Wise caution. Exactly what a good chancellor should say. Too perfect. Thaddeus pushed the thought away. He was being paranoid. Ashford was his mentor, his sponsor. The man who'd believed in him when others saw just another ambitious investigator looking for advancement. Still, that night Thaddeus made copies of his notes. All the calculations, all the patterns he'd identified. Every discrepancy across 5 years. He sealed the copies in waxed leather, hid them beneath a loose stone in his quarters. The stone was in the corner under his bed, covered by a rug. No one would find it unless they were specifically searching. Professional caution. That's all it was. He continued investigating. Started with the Treasury clerks as Ashford suggested, interviewed them casually, asked about procedures, how records were kept, who had access, how adjustments were made. Most were young men from merchant families. Competent, but not brilliant. They followed procedures set by their superiors. Didn't question discrepancies if a senior official said it was an accounting correction. None of them had the authority to manipulate records on their own. He moved up the chain, interviewed department heads. They were more guarded, more aware that an investigator asking questions meant potential trouble. Lord Pelham, Master of Coin, received him in an office cluttered with ledgers and abacuses. Investigator. Pelham didn't smile, didn't offer a chair. What is this regarding? Routine audit, my lord, ensuring proper procedures are being followed. Our procedures are impeccable. Chief Treasurer Grath maintains detailed records. I'm sure he does, my lord. Still, part of my duty is verification. The interview had been brief, polite, unhelpful. Pelham had access, had authority, but seemed genuinely annoyed by questions, not nervous. Thaddeus had interviewed enough guilty men to know the difference. Next was Oswin Blackwood, the royal steward. Blackwood's office was in the main keep, larger than it needed to be, decorated with expensive tapestries that seemed excessive for a man on a steward's salary. Oswin Blackwood was 48, handsome in a practiced way, hair going silver at the temples, which somehow made him look distinguished rather than old. He wore velvet and gold rings, smiled easily, offered wine before Thaddeus even sat down. Investigator Corbin, an honor. I've heard excellent things about your work. Thaddeus accepted the wine but didn't drink. Thank you, Steward Blackwood. I'm conducting a review of financial procedures, part of standard oversight. Of course, of course. Blackwood settled into his chair like a cat in sunlight. Ask me anything. I have nothing to hide. That phrase, nothing to hide. In Thaddeus's experience, people who said that usually did. Your responsibilities include managing castle expenditures, correct. Everything from servants' wages to repairs to banquet supplies. If gold leaves the treasury for castle operations, it goes through my office. And you maintain records of all expenditures. Meticulous records, the chancellor insists on it. Blackwood gestured to shelves lined with ledgers, every transaction documented, every crown accounted for. I'm sure they are. Thaddeus paused. Have you noticed any irregularities, discrepancies between budgeted amounts and actual expenses? Something flickered across Blackwood's face, too fast to identify. Then the smile returned. Nothing significant. Small variations occur naturally. A barrel of wine costs more one month than the next. A shipment of grain is delayed and we pay premium for emergency replacement, but nothing suspicious. And when those variations occur, how are they recorded? Adjustments are made in the quarterly reports. The Chancellor reviews them personally. The Chancellor. Every answer led back to Ashford. Thaddeus asked more questions, took notes. Thanked Blackwood for his time. As he left, he glanced back. Saw Blackwood watching him through the doorway. The smile was gone. The steward's expression was calculating. Cold. Then the door closed. Thaddeus walked back to his office. Sat down, thought. Blackwood had money he shouldn't have. Expensive tastes, access to treasury funds through his position. but he reported to Ashford. Everything went through the Chancellor's review. If Blackwood was stealing, Ashford would have to either be incompetent or complicit. Ashford wasn't incompetent. Thaddeus pulled out fresh parchment, started a timeline. 5 years ago, pattern of discrepancies begins. 4 years ago, Oswin Blackwood appointed royal steward. 3 years ago, Lord Pelham becomes master of coin. 2 years ago, Chief Treasurer Grath hired. Who was in position 5 years ago when this started, Ashford? Ashford had been Lord Chancellor for 12 years, had overseen Treasury operations the entire time, had authority over every person in the financial chain. No, Thaddeus shook his head. He was connecting dots that didn't connect, seeing conspiracy where there might be simple corruption at a lower level. But the instinct wouldn't quiet. He spent the next week digging deeper, requested records of castle expenditures, compared Blackwood's budgets to actual purchases, found discrepancies. Blackwood had purchased grain for the castle kitchens, 300 gold crowns. But when Thaddeus checked with the merchant who supposedly supplied it, the man showed receipts for only 200 crowns. 100 crowns difference. Blackwood had commissioned repairs to the east wall, 500 crowns, but the mason who did the work had been paid 350. 150 crowns difference. Over and over, small amounts. Blackwood was inflating costs, paying less than he claimed, pocketing the difference, and reporting it all to Ashford, who approved every expenditure. Thaddeus compiled everything, 6 weeks of investigation, proof that Blackwood was stealing. But was he acting alone? There was one way to find out. Thaddeus requested a private meeting with the Chancellor. Ashford agreed immediately. "You've made progress?" Ashford asked when Thaddeus entered his office. "Yes, my lord." Thaddeus laid out the evidence, showed the inflated expenditures, the proof of theft. Oswin Blackwood has been stealing from the Treasury hundreds of crowns, possibly thousands over the past few years. Ashford studied the documents. His face gave away nothing. "This is damning," he said finally. "Yes, my lord." "Have you confronted Blackwood?" "Not yet. I wanted to bring this to you first. Get your guidance on how to proceed." Ashford turned away, hands clasped behind his back. The pause stretched long. "Thaddeus, you've done exceptional work, as always." He turned. "But I need you to hold off on moving against Blackwood." "My lord, if Blackwood is stealing, he's likely not working alone. There may be others, merchants who are complicit, clerks who falsify records. If we arrest him now, we tip our hand. His accomplices will scatter." It made sense, logical, professional, but something in Thaddeus's gut twisted. "How long should I wait?" 2 weeks, a month at most. Continue gathering evidence. Build an airtight case against everyone involved. Then we'll move all at once. Clean sweep. And in the meantime, Blackwood continues stealing a few hundred more crowns versus catching an entire network of corruption. Ashford's expression was firm. The larger victory is worth the temporary loss. Thaddeus wanted to argue, wanted to say that justice delayed was justice denied. But Ashford was right. If there were accomplices moving too soon, would let them escape. "I'll continue investigating," Thaddeus said. "Good. And Thaddeus, be even more careful now. If Blackwood suspects you're onto him, he'll run. Or worse." "I understand." Thaddeus left the office, walked back to his quarters, sat on his bed. Something was wrong. Ashford's reaction, his insistence on waiting, his concern about tipping their hand. All reasonable, all logical. But Thaddeus pulled up the loose stone, retrieved his hidden copies of the evidence, spread them on the floor, looked at everything he'd compiled. The pattern of discrepancies going back 5 years. Oswin Blackwood appointed 4 years ago, which meant the theft started before Blackwood was even in position. Someone else had been stealing first. Then Blackwood joined in, or was recruited. By whom? Who had authority 4 years ago to manipulate Treasury records? Ashford. Who appointed Blackwood to Royal Steward? Ashford. Who reviewed and approved every inflated expenditure Blackwood submitted? Ashford. Who was insisting Thaddeus wait before moving against Blackwood? Ashford. The pattern clicked into place like a lock tumbling open. Ashford was the mastermind, had been stealing for years. Brought in Blackwood as a subordinate, used the steward as a tool to skim money from castle expenditures, while Ashford manipulated the larger treasury accounts. If Thaddeus moved against Blackwood, Ashford would sacrifice the steward, let him take the fall, claim he'd been deceived, continue stealing with a new accomplice. Thaddeus sat motionless, processing. His mentor, the man who taught him everything, was a thief, a liar, a traitor to the crown. An hour passed. He sat unmoving. Then he made a decision. He needed more proof, ironclad proof, proof that couldn't be dismissed or explained away, proof against the Lord Chancellor himself. He started wearing a wax recorder, a device used in sensitive investigations. Small block of soft wax that could be pressed onto documents to capture impressions, or held near conversations to record vibrations that a skilled analyst could later interpret. Crude, unreliable, but sometimes effective. Every meeting with Ashford Thaddeus carried it. Hidden in his coat, he documented everything. Every conversation, every instruction to wait, to be patient, to not move yet. 6 weeks passed. Blackwood continued stealing. Ashford continued approving expenditures. Thaddeus continued gathering evidence. And then one morning, 3 days before Thaddeus would be arrested, Blackwood made a mistake. He purchased horses for the castle guard, claimed to pay 800 gold crowns, but the horse trader was an honest man. Showed Thaddeus receipts proving he'd been paid 500, 300 crowns stolen in a single transaction. Bold, arrogant, sloppy. Thaddeus brought it to Ashford. "My lord, I have proof that cannot wait. Blackwood just stole 300 crowns in a single purchase. I need to move against him now." Ashford's expression hardened. "I told you to wait. Waiting is allowing more theft. Your Majesty deserves. Do not presume to tell me what His Majesty deserves." The Chancellor's voice cut like a blade. "You will wait. You will continue investigating, and you will follow my instructions." It was the first time Ashford had ever spoken to him that way. Thaddeus met his eyes, saw something he'd never seen before, not anger, not frustration, fear. The Lord Chancellor was afraid. "Yes, my lord," Thaddeus said quietly. He left the office, went to his quarters, and began preparing for the worst, because men who were afraid did dangerous things. 3 days later, guards arrested him in the Great Hall. 3 days later, he knelt before the king with planted gold and forged ledgers as evidence. 3 days later, everything he'd built was destroyed. But the wax recordings were still hidden. The evidence against Ashford was still safe, and Thaddeus Corbin was still breathing, which meant the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. The storm came on the second night. Thaddeus heard it building for hours, wind rising, thunder rolling closer across the mountains, rain beginning as a whisper against stone, then growing to a roar. Perfect. He'd been counting hours since his arrest. 48 now. Long enough for the guards to settle into routine. Long enough for Ashford to believe him broken. Not long enough for them to expect what came next. Malcolm was on duty. The guard with the bad knee. Thaddeus had heard him climbing the stairs at sunset, heard the change in his gait, the slight drag of the left foot, the pause every 10 steps to ease the joint. Malcolm was a good man, honest, followed orders, would be ashamed when he realized he'd let a prisoner escape. Thaddeus would apologize later, after he'd proven his innocence. He waited until the storm reached its peak. Rain hammering the tower, wind screaming through the arrow slits, thunder loud enough to cover smaller sounds. Then he went to work. The lock first. He'd removed the false heel from his boot the moment the guards left him alone that first night. Inside was a thin strip of tempered steel, bent at precise angles. Not quite a lockpick, but close enough. Thaddeus had picked his first lock at 14. His father had been a locksmith before becoming a magistrate clerk, had taught his son the trade. Honest work, he'd said, and knowledge is never wasted. Honest work. The irony wasn't lost. Thaddeus knelt at the door, slid the steel into the keyhole, felt for the tumblers. There were 3. Simple mechanism, standard castle lock. The first tumbler lifted with a soft click. Thunder crashed. Perfect timing. The second tumbler was stiff, rusted from the damp. He worked it carefully. Patient. Rushing broke picks and raised alarms. It gave. Clicked. The third tumbler lifted easily. The lock turned. Thaddeus eased the door open. Just a crack. Peered through. The landing was empty. Malcolm would be down 1 flight in the guardroom. Regulations said tower guards stayed on the landing outside the cell, but regulations didn't account for human nature. The guardroom had a brazier, had a chair, was dry. Malcolm had bad knees and good sense. He'd be warm. Thaddeus slipped out, closed the door behind him, left it locked from the outside. Might buy him a few extra minutes before anyone noticed. The stairs spiraled down, slick with rain blowing through the arrow slits. He moved slowly, carefully. His boots were soft leather, quiet, but not silent. He paused at the landing above the guardroom. Listened. Footsteps below. Malcolm making rounds. The guard was doing his duty despite the storm. Damn. Thaddeus pressed against the wall, waited. The footsteps climbed, slow, deliberate. Malcolm's breathing audible. The guard was in his 50s, overweight. Stairs were harder every year. He reached the landing, turned toward the cell. Thaddeus moved, not to attack, to evade. He slipped down the stairs while Malcolm's back was turned. Quick, light. Years of moving through crime scenes without disturbing evidence had taught him economy of motion. Malcolm's keys jangled as he reached for the cell door. Thaddeus was already 2 flights down. Behind him a shout. "Prisoner escaped tower breach." So much for the extra minutes. Thaddeus ran. The tower had 4 floors below the cells. Guard quarters, armory, storage, and at the bottom the door to the main castle. That door would be locked, barred from inside. 2 guards minimum. He couldn't go that way. But he'd investigated 3 cases that involved this tower, knew its secrets, including one that most guards had forgotten. 3rd floor, west wall, behind the storage racks of old armor and moth-eaten banners. A door, narrow, built 200 years ago, when the tower had been a last refuge during sieges. An escape route for the royal family if the castle fell. It led to a tunnel. The tunnel ran beneath the outer wall, emerged in the forest half a mile from the castle grounds. Thaddeus hit the 3rd floor running. Voices echoed from below. Guards responding to Malcolm's alarm. Boots on stone, weapons being drawn. He shoved through the storage room door, crashed between racks of armor. Metal clanged, echoed. There, the door was smaller than he remembered. Oak, iron-banded, locked. Of course it was locked. He pulled out the steel pick, worked the lock while footsteps pounded up the stairs behind him. 3rd floor check storage. The lock was old, complex, 5 tumblers instead of 3. His hand shook. Adrenaline, fear. Steady, breathe, treat it like a puzzle. 1st tumbler, 2nd, 3rd. The door behind him crashed open. There, by the west wall. 4th tumbler. A guard ran toward him, sword drawn. 5th tumbler. The lock clicked. Thaddeus shoved the door open, ducked through, slammed it behind him. A sword blade crashed against wood where his head had been a second before. He was in darkness, complete, absolute. The tunnel. Behind him guards hammered on the door, but it opened inward. They'd have to break it down. That would take time. Thaddeus ran blind, hands on the walls. The tunnel was straight. He'd studied the old castle plans, knew it ran 200 yards beneath the wall, then angled up to the forest exit. His boots splashed through water. The tunnel flooded during heavy rains. Was flooding now. The water rose to his ankles, his knees. He pushed forward. The current fought him. Cold, relentless. Behind him, wood splintered. They'd broken through the door. Torches. Get torches. Light flickered against the tunnel walls. Thaddeus was 50 yards ahead. Not enough. The water reached his waist. He could swim. Had learned in the river as a boy. But swimming in armor, he wasn't wearing armor. Still wore the simple clothes he'd been arrested in. Light, practical, lucky. The tunnel angled up. The water became shallow again. Knee-deep, ankle-deep. Ahead, a circle of gray. The exit, covered with brush and vines but visible in lightning flashes. Thaddeus crashed through, into the forest, into the storm. Rain hammered down, wind tore at his clothes. He couldn't see 10 feet. Perfect. He ran, not toward the road, not toward the city. Those would be watched within the hour. He ran deeper into the forest. The same forest he'd tracked outlaws through for 6 years. Every ravine, every cave, every game trail. This was his territory. Behind him shouts, guards emerging from the tunnel. But they didn't know these woods, didn't know where to look. Thaddeus ran for 20 minutes, until his lungs burned and his legs trembled. Then he found what he was looking for, a hollow beneath an ancient oak. Roots formed a natural shelter. He'd used it 3 years ago while tracking a murderer, had hidden here for 2 days waiting for the killer to return to his camp. He crawled inside, pressed against the earth, breathing hard, listened, voices in the distance, fading. The guards were searching the wrong direction. He was free, for now. But freedom wasn't the goal. Freedom was just the tool. He needed proof, evidence against Ashford that couldn't be dismissed. And he needed help. Thaddeus waited until the voices faded completely. Then he moved, not toward the castle, toward the city, toward the one person who might still believe in him. Beatrice Harlow lived in a small house on the edge of the craftsman's quarter. Modest, neat. She'd inherited it from her father when he died 2 years ago. Lived there alone while serving as junior investigator. Thaddeus had been to her home exactly twice. Once to inform her of her appointment. Once to deliver condolences when her father passed. He approached from the back, through the alley. Rain still pouring, his clothes soaked through, He looked like a drowned rat or an escaped prisoner. The house was dark. Past midnight now. She'd be asleep. He couldn't knock on the front door. Neighbors might see, might report. Instead, he picked up a small stone, threw it at her second-floor window. Nothing. Another stone, but been wrong. The window opened. Beatrice's face appeared, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked down, saw him. Her eyes widened. She disappeared from the window. 30 seconds later, the back door opened. She stood there in a nightdress covered by a heavy cloak, staring at him. Master Corbin, you escaped. I did. They'll hunt you, execute you if caught. I know. She stepped aside. Get in here before someone sees you. He entered. She closed the door, locked it, drew the curtains, lit a single candle. In the dim light, he could see her face clearly. No fear, no doubt, just determination. You look half drowned, she said. I swam through a flooded tunnel. Of course you did. She moved to a chest, pulled out blankets. Get those wet clothes off. You'll catch your death. Beatrice, don't argue. There's a screen in the corner. Change. I'll make tea. He didn't argue. 5 minutes later, he sat by her small fireplace wearing dry clothes that had belonged to her father. Too short in the arms and legs, but warm. She handed him tea. Strong, hot. He wrapped his hands around the cup and felt life returning to his fingers. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. You're a fugitive. Helping you makes me a criminal. I know, that's why I shouldn't have come. I just need help proving Ashford is behind the theft. She sat across from him. I know, I've been working on it. Thaddeus looked up sharply. You have. Did you think I'd wait for you to escape and then sit idle? She pulled a leather satchel from beneath her chair. I've been gathering evidence since the night they arrested you. She spread documents on the table between them. Thaddeus's breath caught. Letters, financial records, correspondence between Ashford and various merchants. How did you? I'm a junior investigator. I have access to the castle. Not unlimited, but enough. Her jaw set. I searched Ashford's private study at his estate outside the castle walls. Not his office, he's too smart for that. But his home study, the one he thinks no one knows about. He kept records there, thought they were safe. If you'd been caught, I wasn't. She pointed to one letter. This is correspondence between Ashford and Vincent Caro, the same merchant lord whose name appeared in the forged ledger they used to frame you. Except this letter is dated 2 years ago, before you ever started investigating. Thaddeus picked up the letter. Read. It was carefully worded, could be interpreted as innocent business. But beneath the surface, the meaning was clear. Ashford arranging payments. Caro providing cover for transactions. This isn't enough, Thaddeus said. It's suggestive. But Ashford will claim it's legitimate business on behalf of the crown. I know, Beatrice pulled out another document, which is why I also copied his private financial records, the ones he keeps in a locked drawer in his desk at the estate. How did your lock-picking tools weren't the only ones in the investigator's office. I learned from watching you. She smiled slightly. You're a good teacher. The financial records showed accounts in Ashford's name, not in the royal treasury, personal accounts, with deposits totaling over 12,000 gold crowns in the past 2 years, far more than a Lord Chancellor's salary. This is it, Thaddeus breathed. This proves he's been stealing. It's a start, but we need more. We need to prove the link between these deposits and the missing treasury funds. We need to show the money trail. The treasury records were destroyed. Beatrice's expression darkened. The day after you were arrested, there was a fire in the treasury archive. Convenient. All the ledgers you'd compiled were lost. Of course they were. Ashford covering his tracks. But, Beatrice continued, there are copies. Treasury records are duplicated and sent to the regional governors for verification. Standard procedure to prevent fraud. The governors are appointed by the king and report through Ashford, so he controls access. She leaned forward. Except one. The northern governor, Lord Dunstan. He's old, unyielding, doesn't trust anyone, keeps his own copies of everything independent of the castle archive. Hope flickered in Thaddeus's chest. If we could get those records, we'd have proof of the discrepancies. Proof that matches the deposits in Ashford's accounts. Proof even he can't explain away. The north is 3 days' travel. 2 if you ride hard. Beatrice stood. I have a horse. Not much, but she's steady. And I have money saved. Enough to get you there and back. Beatrice, I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. Her eyes met his, fierce, unwavering. You taught me that justice matters more than safety, that doing what's right is worth the cost. I won't let you stand alone. Gratitude washed through him. Relief. Something else, but he pushed it aside. Thank you, he said quietly. She nodded. Rest tonight. Leave before dawn. The guards will be focused on searching the forest and roads near the castle. They won't expect you to head north. What about you? I'll continue working from inside. There's more evidence to gather. And I need to find Elias Drummond, the former accountant. The same, he was forced to retire 10 years ago, right around the time Ashford's scheme would have been starting. I think Drummond noticed something. I think that's why he was pushed out. If Ashford forced him out, he won't want to help. Unless he wants revenge. Beatrice's smile was cold. 10 years is a long time to carry a grudge. Let's see if Drummond wants justice. They talked for another hour, planning, coordinating, working out signals and dead drops for passing information while Thaddeus was on the run. Finally, Beatrice stood. You should sleep. The bed upstairs is yours. I'll take the floor by the fire. You'll take the bed. You're injured, exhausted, and you have a hard ride ahead. I'll manage fine down here. He started to argue, saw the expression on her face. The same expression she got when she'd made up her mind about an investigation. Yes, ma'am, he said. She smiled. Good. You're learning. He climbed the stairs, found the bedroom. Simple, clean, a bed with a quilt her mother had made, a desk with papers, books on law and investigation. She'd been studying, learning, preparing to become more than a junior investigator. He lay down, expected his mind to race, expected to lie awake planning. Instead, exhaustion took him like a wave. He slept and dreamed of nothing. Dawn came gray and cold. Thaddeus woke to the smell of bread and bacon. Dressed in the clothes Beatrice had left for him, traveling clothes, sturdy, with a hooded cloak to hide his face. Downstairs, she'd prepared food. Bread, cheese, dried meat, enough for 3 days. The horse is in the stable behind the house, she said. Her name is Ash. She's not fast, but she'll get you there. Beatrice, don't, she held up a hand. Don't thank me again. Don't apologize. Just go. Find the evidence. Come back. Prove you're innocent. He nodded. She walked him to the stable. The horse was exactly as described. Not fast, but steady. Patient eyes. He loaded the saddlebags with food and blankets. Mounted. Looked down at Beatrice. If anything happens to me, it won't. If it does, the evidence I gathered before my arrest is hidden in my quarters, beneath the loose stone in the corner under my bed. If you need it, I know, I already found it. He stared at her. She shrugged. I searched your rooms the day after your arrest. Before, the guards could. The stone was obvious once I knew to look. You're a better investigator than I gave you credit for. I learned from the best. She stepped back. Go, and Master Corbin. Yes, don't get yourself killed. I didn't go to all this trouble just to attend your funeral. He smiled despite everything. I'll do my best. He turned the horse north, rode out of the city as the sun broke over the mountains. Behind him, bells began to ring. The alarm. The castle, realizing he'd escaped. The hunt was on, but Thaddeus Corbin had spent years learning to track criminals through these lands, had studied maps, had memorized roads and rivers and mountain passes. Now he'd use that knowledge to stay ahead of his hunters. The forest swallowed him, and for the first time since his arrest, he felt something other than despair. He felt purpose. The ride north was harder than expected. Rain continued. Not the violent storm of the previous night, but steady, cold, the kind that soaked through clothes and into bones. Ash plodded forward without complaint. Thaddeus kept to game trails and forgotten paths, avoided the main road, avoided villages where wanted notices would be posted. By midday, his hands were numb, his cloak heavy with water, but he kept moving. That night, he sheltered in a shepherd's hut he'd used during an investigation 2 years ago. Empty now. The shepherd had moved to the city, but the hut remained, sturdy, dry enough. He built a small fire, ate bread and cheese, thought about Beatrice risking everything to help him, thought about Elias Drummond, the accountant forced into retirement. If Drummond had noticed the theft 10 years ago, he'd have evidence, records, proof, unless Ashford had destroyed it all. No, Ashford was arrogant, confident. He kept records because he believed no one would dare challenge him. That arrogance would be his downfall. Thaddeus slept fitfully, woke before dawn, rode north. The second day was worse than the first. The rain turned to sleet. Ash struggled through mud. They made poor time, but they kept moving. That evening, Thaddeus reached the Northern Territories, Lord Dunstan's lands. The governor's manor sat on a hill overlooking a valley. Stone, solid, defended. Getting in would be the challenge. Thaddeus couldn't simply knock on the door. He was a wanted fugitive. Even if Dunstan believed his story, the governor couldn't openly harbor him without risking the king's wrath. No, he'd have to be clever. He waited until full dark, then approached the manor from the back. Through the fields, over the wall where it was lowest, the grounds were patrolled, but Thaddeus had tracked smugglers through tighter security. He moved between guard rotations, found a servant's entrance, picked a lock. Inside the manor was quiet. Servants asleep, only a few guards awake. He needed to find Dunstan's study. That's where the records would be kept. Second floor, west wing. He'd been to this manor once before delivering a report on border security. He climbed the servants' stairs, moved through darkened hallways, found the study. The door was locked. Of course, he picked it, slipped inside, and froze. A man sat at the desk, old, gray-bearded, holding a candle. Lord Dunstan. The governor looked up, studied Thaddeus with sharp eyes. "I wondered when you'd arrive, Investigator Corbin." Thaddeus's hand moved to the knife at his belt. "Peace," Dunstan said. "I'm not going to call the guards. Sit. We need to talk." Slowly, Thaddeus sat. "You know who I am. Every governor in the kingdom received a warrant for your arrest 3 days ago, accused of corruption, theft, betrayal." Dunstan set down the candle. "I didn't believe it." "Why not?" "Because I've read your reports for years. Seen your work, your many things, Corbin. Persistent, thorough, occasionally reckless, but corrupt." He shook his head. "No, if you were corrupt, you'd have taken bribes to make problems disappear. Instead, you made problems visible. That's not how thieves operate." Relief flooded through Thaddeus. "Then you'll help me." "That depends. What do you need at Treasury records? Copies you keep independent of the castle archive. I need to prove systematic theft over the past 10 years. Dunstan's expression didn't change. "You suspect the Lord Chancellor." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "You have proof. Evidence, not enough alone. But combined with your records, it might be." Dunstan stood, walked to a cabinet, unlocked it, pulled out ledgers. "I've suspected something was wrong for years. The numbers never quite added up. But I'm just a northern governor. Who would believe me over the Lord Chancellor?" He set the ledgers on the desk. "Take them. Prove what you need to prove." "But Corbin." "Yes, my lord. If you're wrong, if this is some elaborate scheme to cover your own guilt, I will hunt you myself. Understand?" "I understand." Dunstan held his gaze, then nodded. "Good. Now get out of my manor before my guards find you. I can believe in your innocence. I can't openly harbor a fugitive." Thaddeus took the ledgers. "Thank you, my lord." "Don't thank me. Just finish this. One way or another." Thaddeus left the way he'd come. Over the wall, through the fields, into the forest. He had the evidence. Now he had to get it back to the capital, back to Beatrice, back to the one chance he had at exposing the truth. The ride south was faster, desperate. He pushed Ash harder than he should have. But time was running out. Ashford would know by now that Thaddeus was gathering evidence, would be moving to counter, would be preparing his final trap. Thaddeus rode through rain and cold and exhaustion, rode toward justice, or death. Either way, the truth would come out. He'd make sure of it. The capital appeared through morning mist like a painting half finished. Thaddeus had ridden through the night. Ash was spent. He was worse. But the ledgers were safe in his saddlebag. Lord Dunstan's records. Proof of every discrepancy, every stolen crown. Going back 12 years, more than enough to hang a Lord Chancellor. If he could present them, if he could reach someone who would listen. If Ashford didn't kill him first. Thaddeus circled the city walls, couldn't enter through the main gates. Guards would have his description, would be watching for exactly this. But years investigating crimes in this city had taught him every weakness, every forgotten entrance, every crack in the armor. The old sewer system ran beneath the eastern quarter, built 200 years ago, partially collapsed now, but still passable if you knew the way. Thaddeus knew the way. He left Ash with a stable master he'd worked with on a smuggling case 3 years ago. The man asked no questions, just took the horse, promised to care for her. Some debts ran deeper than law. Thaddeus entered the sewers through a grate behind a tannery. The smell was worse than he remembered. He wrapped cloth around his face. Didn't help much. He waded through darkness, through filth, through rats that scattered at his approach. 30 minutes of hell. Then he emerged in the craftsman's quarter, 3 blocks from Beatrice's house. He moved through alleys, kept his hood up, head down, just another laborer heading to work. Her house looked the same, shutters closed, door locked, no obvious signs of surveillance. But Ashford was clever, would have men watching, waiting. Thaddeus circled the block, studied the neighboring buildings, the roof lines, the windows, there. Second floor, across the street, a window with curtains drawn. But the fabric moved slightly, someone watching from behind. One of Ashford's men. Maybe more. Thaddeus couldn't go to the front door, couldn't risk leading them directly to Beatrice. Instead, he moved to the building next door, picked the lock on the rear entrance, climbed to the roof. The jump to Beatrice's roof was 8 feet. Not impossible, but dangerous. He backed up, ran, leaped. His hands caught the edge of her roof, slipped. The ledgers in his pack shifted. Threw off his balance, he hung for a moment, arms screaming, then hauled himself up. Lay on the roof, heart pounding. Close, too close. He crawled to the small attic window. Tried it, locked, of course. He used his pick. The lock was simple, opened easily. He slipped inside. The attic was dusty. Storage. Old furniture covered in sheets. He moved carefully. The floorboards creaked. Down the stairs, to the second floor. Beatrice's bedroom door was closed. He knocked softly. No answer. He tried the handle. Unlocked. Pushed it open. The room was empty, but there was blood on the floor. Not much. A few drops near the bed. Thaddeus's heart stopped. He searched the room, found signs of struggle. A chair knocked over, papers scattered, and on the desk a note, in handwriting he didn't recognize. We have the girl. Come to the old mill at sunset. Alone, bring the evidence you've gathered. We'll trade. Not signed. Didn't need to be. Ashford. The bastard had taken Beatrice. Rage tightened Thaddeus's hands into fists. She'd risked everything to help him, and now she was paying the price. He looked at the ledgers in his pack. The evidence that could bring down the Lord Chancellor. The evidence Ashford wanted destroyed. The trade was a trap. Obviously, Ashford would take the ledgers, kill them both, dispose of the bodies. Clean, efficient, no witnesses. But what choice did Thaddeus have? He couldn't let Beatrice die. Couldn't abandon her, which meant he needed a plan. He sat on her bed, thought. The old mill was outside the city, abandoned for years, isolated, perfect for an ambush. If he went alone, he'd die. If he didn't go, Beatrice would die. Unless he didn't go alone, didn't bring the real evidence, unless he turned the trap around. Thaddeus pulled out the ledgers, studied them. Lord Dunstan had given him 3 volumes, each covering 4 years, detailed, comprehensive. Impossible to forge in a few hours. But he didn't need to forge all of them, just enough to fool Ashford long enough. He left Beatrice's house the way he'd entered, over the roofs, through the alleys, found what he needed in the market district. A scribe shop. The owner owed him a favor, a daughter saved from a blackmail scheme 2 years ago. Investigator Corbin. The scribe paled when he saw him. You're wanted. They say you're... I know what they say, and it's lies. Manya. Thaddeus set a ledger on the counter. I need you to copy the format of these pages. The layout, the headers, the columns. Fill in some random numbers to make it look real. Just enough to pass a quick glance in dim light. That's... I saved your daughter. You said you owed me anything. The scribe swallowed, nodded. How many pages? 50, and I need them in 3 hours. That's impossible. You have 2 assistants. Set them to work. I'll pay triple your usual rate. Thaddeus pulled out coins, the last of Beatrice's money. Please. The scribe looked at the coins, at Thaddeus's face, at whatever he saw there that spoke of desperation and determination. 3 hours, he agreed. Thaddeus waited, paced, watched the sun climb toward afternoon. The pages came, perfect copies, format identical, random numbers filled in, headers matching, enough to fool someone in dim light. For a few minutes, that's all he needed. He took the pages, bound them to look like ledgers, identical to Dunstan's volumes. Then he prepared the real ledgers, wrapped them in oilcloth, sealed them tight, and went to find the one other person who might help. Elias Drummond lived in a small cottage on the edge of the city. Former royal accountant, forced into retirement 10 years ago. Thaddeus had never met him, But Beatrice had mentioned him, said he might want revenge. Time to find out. He knocked on the door, a voice from inside. Who's there? Thaddeus Corbin. I need your help. Long pause. The door opened. Elias Drummond was 58, thin, gray hair, sharp eyes that took in Thaddeus's appearance in one sweep. You're the investigator they're hunting, the one who supposedly stole from the treasury. I didn't steal anything, but I know who did. Edmund Ashford. Thaddeus blinked. You know, I've known for years, just couldn't prove it. Drummond stepped aside. Come in, quickly. The cottage was neat, organized. Books on every wall, papers stacked with precision, the home of a man who lived in numbers. You were forced out because you noticed the theft, Thaddeus said. I noticed discrepancies, reported them to Ashford. He thanked me, said he'd investigate. Drummond's laugh was bitter. 3 weeks later, I was accused of incompetence, retired with a pension, silenced. Why didn't you go to the king? With what proof Ashford had already altered the records I'd flagged? Made me look like a fool who couldn't add properly. He poured wine, offered a cup. I've spent 10 years trying to find evidence, trying to prove I was right. Never could. Until now. Thaddeus pulled out the real ledgers. Lord Dunstan's copies, 12 years of records, showing every theft, every discrepancy. Drummond's hands shook as he took them, opened them, read, his eyes widened. This is it. This proves everything. It does, which is why Ashford wants them destroyed. He's holding my assistant, a young woman named Beatrice Harlow, wants to trade her life for the ledgers. You can't give him these. I won't. I'm giving him forgeries. Thaddeus explained his plan. But I need the real ledgers safe, hidden where Ashford can never find them. And if something happens to me, I'll make sure they reach the king. Drummond's jaw set. I've waited 10 years for this. I won't let it slip away. There's more. Thaddeus pulled out the wax recording. The ones he'd made of conversations with Ashford. These need to go to someone who can analyze them, someone who can testify to their authenticity. I know people, scholars who work with acoustic analysis. They'll verify them. And you need to contact Duchess Cordelia Winthrop. She's Ashford's rival on the King's Council. She'll listen. She'll act. You're assuming you'll die at this exchange. I'm planning for the possibility. Thaddeus met his eyes. Beatrice Harlow risked everything to help me. I won't let her die, even if it costs me everything. Drummond nodded slowly. You're a good man, Corbin. Better than I was. I let Ashford silence me. You're fighting back. I had help from people braver than me. Then let's make sure their bravery matters. Drummond stood. Go to your meeting. I'll handle the rest. And Corbin, yes, don't die. I want to see Ashford's face when he realizes you beat him. Thaddeus smiled despite everything. I'll do my best. The old mill sat beside a river gone dry. Stone building, roof partially collapsed, windows like empty eye sockets. Perfect place for murder. Thaddeus arrived as the sun touched the horizon. Alone, carrying the forged ledgers in a leather satchel. The real ones were with Drummond, safe. He approached openly. No point in stealth. They'd be watching. The mill door stood open. He stepped inside. The interior was larger than expected. Old grinding stones, broken machinery, shadows. And in the center, Beatrice, tied to a chair, cloth gag in her mouth, blood on her face from a cut above her eye, but alive, alert, angry. 4 men stood around her, armed, hired muscle, not castle guards, and behind them emerging from shadows like a specter, Oswin Blackwood. Investigator Corbin, the steward smiled, punctual as always. Let her go, Blackwood. In time, first the ledgers you've gathered. I believe you have Lord Dunstan's records. Thaddeus held up the satchel. Right here. Bring them to me, slowly. Thaddeus walked forward, eyes on Beatrice. She was trying to tell him something. Her eyes moved, left, up. He caught it. A warning. More men, in the rafters. Crossbows. Of course. He reached the center of the room. Set the satchel down. The ledgers. Now let her go. Let me verify them first. Blackwood opened the satchel, pulled out the forged ledgers, flipped through pages. In the dim light, they looked perfect. Blackwood nodded, satisfied. Kill them both. The crossbowmen raised their weapons. Thaddeus dove, not away, toward Beatrice. Bolts flew, one grazed his shoulder. Pain. Ignore it. He hit the floor, rolled, grabbed the chair, tipped it backward. Beatrice and the chair fell, behind the grinding stone. Cover. More bolts struck stone. Sparked. Thaddeus's hands found the ropes binding Beatrice. Started working them. His fingers were slick with blood from the shoulder wound. The men on the floor charged, swords drawn. Thaddeus pulled the knife from his boot. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first man swung. Thaddeus ducked, slashed, caught the man's leg. The man fell. Second man, more careful, circled. Thaddeus backed up, put himself between Beatrice and the threat. The man lunged. Thaddeus parried. Barely. The man was trained, skilled. They traded blows. Thaddeus was losing. The shoulder wound slowed him. Then Beatrice was beside him. Ropes cut, gag removed, holding a chunk of broken machinery like a club. She swung, caught the swordsman in the head. He dropped. "Nice timing," Thaddeus gasped. "You taught me to improvise." The other two men charged together. This was it. They couldn't win, not against four men and crossbows. But they could buy time. Time for Drummond to reach the Duchess. Time for the truth to surface. Thaddeus raised his knife, prepared to die fighting. The crossbowmen aimed, then hoofbeats, dozens of them. Thunder approaching. Blackwood's head snapped toward the sound. "What?" The mill doors exploded inward. Not Ashford's men. Castle guards. 20 strong, armor gleaming, swords drawn, and at their center, crown on his head, fury in his eyes, King Alaric Mackenzie. Blackwood's face went white as ash. The crossbowmen hesitated. Hired killers were one thing. Firing on the king, that was suicide. They lowered their weapons. Everyone froze. The king stood in the doorway, crown on his head, sword in hand, face carved from granite. "Drop your weapons," he commanded. The hired men hesitated, looked at Blackwood. The steward's face had gone white. "Your Majesty, this isn't—" "I said drop them." The weapons clattered to the floor. King Alaric walked forward, stopped in front of Thaddeus. "Investigator Corbin, you look terrible." "Your Majesty." Thaddeus could barely speak. "How Duchess Winthrop brought evidence to me 3 hours ago. Ledgers, recordings, testimony from a former accountant named Drummond." The king's eyes were ice. "She made a compelling case that my Lord Chancellor has been stealing from me for 12 years. "It's true, Your Majesty." "I know." The king turned to Blackwood. "Where is Ashford?" The steward said nothing. "Your Majesty." A voice from the door. Edmund Ashford stepped into the mill. Alone. Unarmed. "I'm here." He walked forward calmly, as if attending a council meeting, not a trap that had collapsed around him. "Edmund." The king's voice held something Thaddeus had never heard. Betrayal. Pain. 12 years. You were my friend, my advisor, and you stole from me, from the kingdom. "I provided services worth far more than I took," Ashford said quietly. "I ran your kingdom, made it prosperous, made you look strong while you sat on your throne and played at being king. You betrayed your oath. I fulfilled it better than you did yours." Ashford's mask cracked, showed the contempt beneath. "You're weak, Alaric. You always were. Without me, this kingdom would have fallen apart." "Then you should have asked for higher compensation, not stolen it." "It wasn't theft. It was payment for services rendered." Ashford looked at Thaddeus. "And I would have gotten away with it, if not for this persistent fool who wouldn't stop asking questions." "That persistent fool saved my life from poison," the king said. "And now he's saved my treasury. While you," he turned to the guards, "arrest Lord Chancellor Ashford and Steward Blackwood. Take them to the tower." The guards moved forward. Ashford didn't resist, didn't fight, just smiled. "This won't end well for you, Alaric. The council won't accept. The council will accept what I tell them, or they can join you in the tower." The king's voice was steel. "I've been weak, trusted too easily. That ends now." They took Ashford away, took Blackwood, took the hired men. The mill emptied, leaving Thaddeus and Beatrice with the king. "Your Majesty," Thaddeus began, "You escaped prison, evaded capture, fled the kingdom." The king's expression was unreadable. "That's a death sentence in most kingdoms." "I know. But you also exposed the greatest theft in our history, saved the treasury, risked your life for truth." He paused. "I owe you an apology, investigator. I should have trusted you, should have questioned the evidence. Instead, I let Ashford manipulate me, use me. You couldn't have known, Your Majesty." "I should have." The king sheathed his sword. "Your position as royal investigator is restored, with full authority, and I'm offering you a promotion. Lord High Investigator, direct oversight of all investigations in the kingdom." Thaddeus looked at Beatrice. She nodded, encouraging. He turned back to the king. I appreciate the offer, Your Majesty, but I respectfully decline. The king blinked. You decline? The position of royal investigator is enough, more than enough. I don't want power. I want to serve justice. That's what I've always wanted. A slow smile crossed the king's face. That's exactly why I offered it to you. But I understand. Royal investigator it is. He turned to Beatrice. And you, Miss Harlow, you risked everything to help clear Corbin's name. That deserves recognition. I'm appointing you senior investigator, equal rank to Corbin. Beatrice's eyes widened. Your Majesty, I accept it. That's an order. The king's smile widened. The kingdom needs more people willing to risk everything for truth. I want you training the next generation. Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you. The king nodded, started to leave, paused. Corbin, one more thing. Yes, Your Majesty. Don't escape from my dungeons again. Next time I might not believe you're innocent. Despite everything, Thaddeus smiled. I'll try my best, Your Majesty. The king left. Thaddeus and Beatrice stood in the empty mill, bleeding, exhausted, alive. We did it, Beatrice said quietly. You did it. You gathered the evidence, found Drummond, reached the Duchess. I just rode north and got captured. You exposed the conspiracy. You refused to quit even when everything was against you. She looked at him. That's what matters. He nodded, too tired to argue. They walked out of the mill together, into the evening light. Tomorrow there would be trials, testimony, justice. But tonight they'd done what they set out to do. They'd found the truth. The trial lasted 6 days. Oswin Blackwood confessed on the 3rd day, confirmed everything, testified against Ashford in exchange for exile instead of execution. Edmund Ashford never confessed, never showed remorse, was convicted on overwhelming evidence and sentenced to hang. Thaddeus attended the execution, not because he wanted to, because it was his duty. Ashford saw him in the crowd, smiled, said nothing. Thaddeus wanted to feel satisfaction, wanted vindication. Instead, he felt hollow. The man who'd taught him to investigate, who'd believed in him, who'd shaped him into who he was. That man had never existed, just a thief wearing a mentor's mask for 12 years. The rope ended his life quickly. Thaddeus turned away before the body stopped swinging. Some betrayals cut deeper than blades. This one would leave scars he'd carry the rest of his life. He walked away from the scaffold. Beatrice fell into step beside him. You all right? She asked. I will be. They returned to their office. The same small room in the East Wing. 2 desks now instead of 1. A stack of case files waited. Murders to solve, thefts to investigate, justice to serve. The first week after the mill, Beatrice worked in silence. The cut above her eye healed to a thin scar. But Thaddeus saw her hands shake when she picked up files. Saw her flinch at footsteps in the hall. On the 8th day, she looked up. I'm all right, she said. Just needed time. He nodded, understood. Some wounds were visible, others healed slower. Thaddeus picked up the first file, read the summary. Beatrice did the same. Ready to get back to work, she asked. Always. They worked through the afternoon, through the evening, until candles burned low. Just 2 investigators, doing the job they'd sworn to do, finding truth, serving justice. 1 case at a time. 3 weeks later, the king visited their office, not to inspect, to thank. I've been reading Treasury reports at myself now, Alaric said. Every line, every number. His eyes met Thaddeus's, held them. I won't be a fool again. Thaddeus believed him. Trust once broken could be rebuilt. But it required work, vigilance, honesty. The kingdom was learning that lesson. So was its king. Outside, the kingdom moved on. The treasury was secured. New officials appointed, systems reformed. But in a small office in the East Wing, nothing had changed. Thaddeus Corbin was still royal investigator, still persistent, still thorough, still fighting for what was right. And that was enough. It had to be. Because tomorrow there would be another case, another mystery, another chance to prove that truth mattered. He closed the file, looked at Beatrice. Thank you, he said, for believing in me when no one else did. You'd have done the same for me. I would. She smiled. I know. That's why I helped. They left the office together. Walked through corridors now familiar again. Thaddeus had his position back, his freedom, his purpose. But more than that, he had something he'd never expected, a partner, an equal. Someone who understood that justice was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth dying for, if necessary. But tonight they'd live. They'd go home, rest, heal. And tomorrow they'd do it all again. Because that's what investigators did. They found truth in darkness. They brought light to shadows. They served justice even when it cost everything. And they never ever quit. Thaddeus Corbin walked into the night, free, vindicated, whole. The fight was over. But the work continued, and that was exactly how it should be.